The 11th Doctor is fond of saying that time can be rewritten, despite the first Doctor's insistence in the 1964 story The Aztecs that you can't rewrite history, not one line. Doctor Who has many wonderful qualities, but consistency is not one of them. But set aside the question whether it is possible for the Doctor to change history, what does the show say about whether she ought to change it? Is it right or wrong to try to do so? In order to better understand how Doctor Who approaches this question, let's discuss the series through the philosophical lens of ethics. Ethics, also known as moral philosophy, is the branch of philosophy concerned with questions about how we should be and how we should act. Ethics considers questions of right and wrong, good and evil, virtue and vice, justice and injustice, and for an ethical philosopher, the first question is usually, what the heck even are those words? When we say that a thing is evil or that someone did the right thing, what does that even mean? What qualities make a thing or a person good or bad? Well, there are a lot of ways to answer that question. Philosophers are like Doctor Who fans in that none of them can ever agree on anything. But for the purposes of a 15-minute video, let's go ahead and boil several thousand years of ethical philosophy down to a tiny number of basic theories. How many theories?
3. I have seen 3.
First, consequentialism. Consequentialism is the ethical theory that attributes moral value by the merits of an action's consequences. If you do something and it has a positive result, then congratulations, it was the right thing to do. If your actions only made things worse, then they were morally wrong even if you were just trying to help. So in answer to our question, is it ever morally right to change history? A consequentialist might say that it's right if and only if your actions make things better. Second, deontology is the ethical theory that attributes moral value by adherence to universal rules. There are certain things you must always do and others that you must never do. Always tell the truth, never kill anyone. Even if you think you could brighten someone's day by telling a white lie, or if you think you could protect an innocent person by killing someone who means them harm, rules are rules and it's just wrong to break them. So again, how will a deontologist answer our question? They might say it's okay to change history if and only if you are following the rules. For our third and final theory, virtue ethics attributes moral value by the merits of a person's character traits. Instead of focusing on whether a particular act is good or bad, virtue ethics focuses on what kind of person you should try to be. For instance, a virtue ethicist might say that you should cultivate the virtue of bravery or wisdom or charity or honor, and avoid vices like vanity or laziness. So when asking whether it is right to change history, they might say, if and only if you are exercising virtue. So let's look at Doctor Who and see which of these approaches we can find in action. As our first example, let's look at the 1975 Tom Baker story, Genesis of the Daleks. The Fourth Doctor takes on a mission from the Time Lords to change history so that the Daleks will never have been created in the first place.
Do you mean avert their creation?
Or affect their genetic development?
That's feasible.
When the time comes for him to take action,
Do I have the right?
he hesitates to consider the ethics.
Simply touch one wire against the other. The Daleks cease to exist.
This is a great example to see what the Doctor's ethics are truly made of, because it's a tough choice that he seems to really struggle with. And in the Fourth Doctor's case, he doesn't just stick to one of these approaches, he runs through all three. First up, he raises a consequentialist argument, that the Daleks' existence has some positive consequences.
You see, some things could be better with the Daleks. Many future worlds will become allies just because of their fear of the Daleks.
The consequence of preventing those alliances, he argues, would be morally unacceptable. Second, he asks Sarah Jane Smith if she could kill a child that she knew would grow up to become a murderous dictator.
Could you then kill that child?
The implication is that no matter the consequences, certain kinds of actions, like murdering a defenseless creature, are just always wrong as a rule. So, the Doctor is making a deontological argument. Thirdly, he observes that by wiping out a whole species,
Then I become like them. I'd be no better than the Daleks.
that's an appeal to virtue ethics, focusing less on the action itself, and more on what kind of person he would have to be in order to do it. In hesitating, the Doctor misses his chance to destroy the Daleks. At the end of the story, when considering the outcome, he returns to the consequentialist argument and reflects that,
I know that although the Daleks will create havoc and destruction for millions of years, I know also that out of their evil must come something good.
It's unfortunate how much emphasis gets put on this consequentialist argument because it's kind of hard to buy. Do the positive benefits of alliances really outweigh the carnage caused by the Daleks? If the Doctor wanted to be sure one way or the other, he would need to do an extensive cataloging of likely consequences and weigh them against one another, essentially a pro-con list.
Crush the lesser races, conquer the galaxy, unimaginable power, unlimited rice pudding.
This might well be good moral practice for a consequentialist, but it doesn't make for good TV. Doctor Who tends to steer clear of this sort of analysis.
Don't do that.
And consequentialism rarely ends up as the driving ethical theory on the show. So let's skip ahead 33 years, no big deal, to talk about deontology. In The Fires of Pompeii, the 10th Doctor and Donna Noble arrive in Pompeii one day before Mount Vesuvius erupts, killing the whole city.
Which makes Volcano Day tomorrow.
The Doctor says that Pompeii is a fixed point in history, which must not be altered. This lays out a universal rule: do not change a fixed point.
Says me.
What, you're in charge?
TARDIS Time Lord, yeah.
Donna Human, no!
But as Donna points out, other rules are in play too. Doesn't the Doctor live by a rule that says save other people who are in danger? So what happens when these two rules come into conflict with one another? Well, the universe's most famous deontologist thought of that. His name is Immanuel Kant. Kant felt that some universal rules were more important than others, and he called these perfect duties. For instance, there's a rule never to steal, and Kant might say that that's a perfect duty. There's also a rule like respect your elders, but that's an imperfect duty. You have to do your best to do that, but if an elder directs you to steal, then the perfect duty is going to win out. For the Doctor in Pompeii, do not change a fixed point seems to be a perfect duty, which is why it comes before the imperfect duty, save people who are in danger. Donna convinces him to save a few people, but he can only do this insofar as he doesn't violate his perfect duty to keep history on course. The Waters of Mars further develops this point by showing us the Doctor making the opposite choice and framing this as a moral error. On Mars, in 2051, the Doctor meets the ill-fated crew of the Bowie Base 1 Mars mission, whose deaths are a fixed point in history. The Doctor spends most of the episode just being sad that he can't help them. He's very sad, very David Tennant sad. But eventually the angst is just too much, and he ends up rescuing several members of the crew. Now this is a clear violation of his perfect duty. He tells himself that it's okay, because the laws of time no longer apply in the absence of other Time Lords.
Do you know who that leaves? Me! It's taken me all these years to realize the laws of time are mine, and they will obey me!
But we, the audience, are clearly meant to disagree. Captain Adelaide Brooke is so disturbed by his decision that she commits suicide just to negate it. And in the next episode, when the Doctor alludes to these events, he is racked with painful regret, just deliciously painful.
But I did some things, it went wrong.
The theme that the Doctor can't or mustn't change history is a major tragic motif throughout the Russell T Davies era. Just as a time lock prevents the Doctor from revisiting and changing the outcome of the Time War, deontological ethics forbid him from meddling with fixed points. During the tenure of Davies' successor, Stephen Moffat, a somewhat different approach is taken. In the 11th Doctor era, history is generally treated as malleable, but in The Wedding of River Song, the major conflict revolves around a choice to change or preserve a fixed point in history. History dictates that at Lake Silencio, River must shoot the Doctor and, as far as she knows, kill him. But she refuses. Under the strict deontology of the Waters of Mars, River's choice would be judged as morally wrong, and this is how the Doctor sees it at first.
This is a fixed point in time.
Fixed points can be rewritten.
No, they can't. Of course they can't. Who told you?
But try as the Doctor may, River cannot be convinced to kill him. It's just not compatible with who she is. Fixed points be damned. Only after River makes this fully clear does the Doctor realize that she has to be brought in on his plan
Please.
to fake his own death.
Help me. There isn't another way.
At which point the secret is shared and the two become bound by mutual trust and, in fact, by marriage. Which resolves the situation entirely because the conflict of the episode never really hinged on the sanctity of the fixed point. It was a personal problem between the Doctor and River. In this way, the Moffat era signals a shift in its ethical approach from an action-centered view of morality to a person-centered view, i.e., virtue ethics. The clearest articulation of this comes in The Day of the Doctor, when the Doctor revisits the moment of his decision to destroy Gallifrey. Here, Moffat lays out a theory of virtue ethics for the Doctor.
You told me the name you chose was a promise. What was the promise?
using language he borrows from Terence Dix.
Never cruel or cowardly.
These are the qualities that the Doctor embodies at his best.
Never give up. Never give in.
And his choice of the name Doctor represents a promise to live by these virtues. He's acting rightly insofar as he lives up to them, and he's acting wrongly insofar as he betrays them. This leads to a stunning reversal. While we previously understood that the Doctor could not dare change history to avert the destruction of Gallifrey,
You're not actually suggesting that we change our own personal history.
I'm suggesting something far worse. What exactly?
now the show posits that he absolutely must.
Change my mind.
Because the person described by the name Doctor cannot be a person who abides the burning of the innocents of Gallifrey. And so the Doctors hide Gallifrey away so that it only appears to be destroyed. Now, a pattern is emerging. Can the events of Lake Silencio be avoided? No, but it turns out the Doctor faked his own death, so it's no big deal. Can Gallifrey's fate be changed? No, but we learn Gallifrey only appeared to be destroyed. One might accuse Moffat in both instances of sidestepping the question. But perhaps that is not such a bad thing. The purpose of an ethical theory is to guide our actions, to tell us what we should do. According to Moffat's virtue ethics, what the time traveler should do when confronted with a tough ethical dilemma is sidestep the question.
What was the teacher? What's the right question then?
The question whether it is right or wrong to change history is simply never allowed to be the primary ethical consideration. It should be, and always will be, overridden by the hero's ethical commitment to be a particular kind of person. However, with the recent change in showrunner, the approach to our central question is once again reset. So far, Chris Chibnall's era has emphasized the importance of not changing history. In Rosa, the Doctor and her friends must keep history on course so that the Montgomery bus boycott happens as history records. However, in The Witchfinders, the Doctor lays down a rule against interfering, only to break that rule moments later in an unsuccessful attempt to save Old Mother Twiston from being drowned as a witch.
Meet me on the other side.
So much for not interfering.
Over the bridge.
It seems then that this Doctor is not a rule-following deontologist.
Also, don't cut that back to me. Our rules change all the time.
So, what ethical theory can we apply? Rosa, in particular, supports a consequentialist reading. The villain, Krasko, wants to undo the American Civil Rights Movement, and for the Doctor and her friends, stopping Krasko is not a matter of rules or virtues. They stop him because his actions would have bad consequences.
Now we know what our task is. Keep history in order. No changing it, just guarding it against someone who wants to disrupt it.
However, as with Genesis of the Daleks, the consequentialist approach leaves the door wide open for criticism. Is preserving the established history really the best set of consequences the Doctor can aim for? Aren't there things she can do to improve the lives of Black Americans in the 1950s and thereafter? We have seen the Doctor topple unjust systems on planets around the universe, from the First Doctor in Dalek-occupied future London to the 10th Doctor liberating the Ood Sphere, and many, many more examples besides. So what reason can she possibly have for leaving Montgomery with Jim Crow laws still in place? Now, I'm not seriously suggesting that the Doctor Who production team should film a story where a white Time Lord lands in the middle of the civil rights movement and becomes the big hero who solves racism in America forever. They have a social responsibility to treat history with respect. No such responsibility exists with regard to the Ood Sphere. Even keeping this in mind, it is somewhat disquieting to see the Doctor face down injustice and decide that her ethical responsibility is to do nothing and to let it play out. What then does the current iteration of the show consider to be the Doctor's responsibility in historical situations? For one possible answer to that question, let's turn again to virtue ethics. But this is a different flavor of virtue ethics from the version employed by Moffat. There is a form of contemporary feminist virtue ethics described by the philosopher Nell Noddings, which focuses on the virtue of care and the formation of caring interpersonal relationships as the foundational element of moral action. The 13th Doctor is certainly much more of a relationship builder than any previous Doctor, and she is more actively concerned in the well-being of her friends. For instance, in Demons of the Punjab, the Doctor's concern about changing history is not centered on a purely consequentialist consideration of how the present might change, but on the specific ramifications for her friend Yaz.
Be careful what you say back there. The wrong word in the wrong moment. You can interfere yourself out of existence. Do you understand?
Furthermore, while she does not act to change the outcome of history and save Prem's life, she acts to form bonds and to support the flourishing of others' bonds. She even officiates Prem and Umbrian's wedding and gives a lovely speech about the importance of their love.
In all its forms, is the most powerful weapon we have.
Despite knowing that their time together will be tragically short. It's possible, therefore, that moral action for the 13th Doctor is less about principles and more about relationships.
Do you want to do it together?
This is something moral philosophers may want to keep an eye on as her adventures continue. And when I say moral philosophers, what I really mean is every viewer who likes to think about what it means to be a better, more ethical person, which I hope includes everybody watching this video, because none of us is ever going to hop in a time machine and be presented with a choice about whether or not to change history.
Crossing into established events is strictly forbidden, except for cheap tricks.
But it's not so far-fetched to think that one day we'll be put in a situation where, like the 10th Doctor, we must accept the hard truths we cannot change and find a way to move forward. Or, like the 11th Doctor, we will be brought to a point where we must decide who we are and draw a line in the sand, even if it breaks all the rules. Or, like the 13th Doctor, we will find ourselves in a scrape where the best and most heroic thing we can do is hold tight to our fam. So even though our lives and our circumstances are very different from the Doctor's, we can still follow her example and act on our best judgment to do what is right and decent and, above all, kind.